Alright, so today's video, I'm going to be looking at the K2 Kickboard. Perfect. So the reason the K2 Kickboard is of interest to my channel is because supposedly it is the predecessor to the original trucks. And these are not original trucks. These are handboard trucks. So handboard trucks are based off original trucks, and original trucks, supposedly, are based off the K2 Kickboard. So, in a word, how these work is they've got a spring right here, and they've got a cam in the back. And in the back, you've got this cam here, and the cam, as it rotates, it spreads apart. And that spreading apart is what compresses the spring. They don't have a cam in this one because it's right here. So there's no resistance. But this K2 Kickboard does have resistance. And basically what I want to do is I just want to tear this whole thing apart and take a look at everything. Especially since it's in really bad shape. Take a look at that wheel. Yeah. Before I take it apart, I suppose I should do a bit more of an overview. So it's got this handle here, and this handle unscrews. And as you unscrew it, let's lift at the top, and you can twist it to lock it down. There, now it's locked in place and it's really solid. And of course the handle extends. And this thing can lean a lot. It's really interesting. So the way I'm handling it up here is just kind of pushing it back and forth with my hands. And I actually really like the size and form factor of this whole thing. And I got it just as a whim. I'm kind of excited to get it going. All right, so now let's take it apart. Okay, so this is pretty interesting so far. I've got it stripped down to its bitty parts. This deck actually seems really nice and is in great condition. So the wheels, every single hub on these wheels is broken. The rear wheel is just completely destroyed, which is interesting because the wheels are something that has been figured out the longest. And yeah, I would think that would be the hardest thing to screw up. The bit we're really interested in is over here. Here we've got the original truck remake from Handboards, and here we've got the K2 truck. I believe on a different scooter, they had a different arrangement where they had this sort of truck on the front and this sort of truck with this style of construction on the rear. And I believe what happened was just original trucks just adopted that rear as a skateboard truck. And here's a point towards that argument. Original trucks, and even these handboard trucks, they don't use standard skate hardware. They use a larger size. And if I look at the hardware that fits this K2 truck, it is indeed the same size for the original truck, or the handboard truck. So I believe even these handboard trucks are going to be based on the castings of what would have been the rear truck on one of the other K2 models. So pretty interesting. But let's take these apart so we can look at these differences. First off, the most obvious thing is here the spring is at the end, and on this one the spring is between these two channels. So that makes the construction a bit different. On this one, it's retained by this nut at the end, and it all comes out, and this whole thing slides out sideways, yeah, like that. It's been a while since I've taken this apart. So I've got it open. Let's put the real cams on here. So this one goes there, this one goes there. There, so that's the actual real cams that are supposed to go on here. So for adjustability on this one, it just has a little bit of movement along that slot there, and there's really not a whole lot of freedom, and especially since if you over tighten it, you risk cracking these cams. It seems to be a fundamental flaw with that design. So here you actually, it looks like you unscrew from the front like this, which is very different. This comes off. I think it's just a captive nut in there. Look at the difference in these springs. Wild. This is a much bigger spring, isn't it? And, oh, it's just a ring. Oh, it's got a thrust bearing. Wow. Now this is way different than what I was expecting. So the thrust bearing is going to help it take really high loads. And there's the wave cam. Interesting. It's very... Whoa, okay, look at that. So it has the same engagement mechanism with a slot in the rear and the slot in the front. But look, it's got a cup around it, so it's captive. And so this isn't going to split nearly as easily as these ones are going to. So here you've got this really thin section that can snap. And as you put the load on it, it kind of spreads this apart, and that's what happens, it breaks. But here, that thin section has this outer wall that's going to take that stress. And on this side, it can't stress because it's held in captive by that wall. That's a little gritty in there. Wow. And then the bolt is captive. It's completely fixed in there. I'd have to pound that out to do anything with it. Wow. It's the same thing basically, but this seems like a much more capable truck. It just makes me wonder why this truck isn't more like this truck. In this one, you're relying on this bolt being held straight in order to keep slop from happening. And on this one, not only is that bolt completely fixed on this end, but that sort of slop isn't going to happen when you've got a thrust bearing in there. It's really crazy. There's only one other truck I know of that has the thrust bearings in them, and that's the Roja truck. And the Roja truck is a really, really good precision truck. It's understandable that this form factor doesn't work well, or it doesn't really fit on a skateboard, but this is undoubtedly the better design. But yeah, I'm really surprised at just how much quality and thought has gone into this thing. I was fully expecting it to share all the same problems of this design, which would have been for underneath the deck. And I wonder if all these differences were just compromises just so that it could fit under the deck. And this one was able to have a little bit more freedom because it was sticking out the front and could take up all the space that the design really needed. I'm going to try to get this going again, and I'll be back in the future. For now, Longboard Technology, over and out. Alright, so this is where we've ended up. Back together, and it's working. For the rear wheel, I took this old beat up wheel for my boosted board. It's the worst shaped wheel I've had, and I lathed it up. It's the exact right size now and everything. It's rounded off and it works great. I had these 110 millimeter wheels, and the originals were 106, so that's close enough. I had to grease and clean everything, and it was a real pain. I painted the hardware black because it was all rusty and gross looking, and I didn't have to do anything for basically anything else. And it's all ready to go. So let's ride it for a little bit here. Alright, so riding this thing is actually a lot of fun. The deck is really awesome. It's nice and comfortable, it's flexy, it looks good. I don't think I ever want to ride a scooter with an extruded aluminum deck ever again. Just the way this rides with the wooden deck is so nice. The way it carves and the way it turns is interesting. You don't have the really sharp turns you normally do have on a scooter because you can't turn the handlebar to steer. You're just leaning it like a skateboard. And so in order to have that tight turns, you have to lean a lot. And it becomes pretty interesting to do that. Overall, I still think it's a really, really cool little scooter. and I especially like the form factor of it when it's all folded up, and it's just lightweight and nice to carry with you. And if you had this scooter in 6th grade, you would have been one of the coolest kids on the block. So there we go. That's my impressions of the K2 Kickboard. Longboard Technology. Over and out.